All right, well, good afternoon, and thank you for coming to our board meeting. Next item on the agenda will be number 33, presentation of the San Benito County Library Needs Assessment. Louis? Louis, all right?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, good afternoon. I am very pleased to have for your consideration this afternoon Ms. Dana Bracchia. Dana is Vice President of Library Systems and Services. She will be presenting the Board of Supervisors with the results of the needs assessment that was conducted on behalf of the county and the city. Just some brief background. This issue has been discussed at length by the Intergovernmental Committee, which consists of representatives of the City of San Juan Bautista, City of Hollister, and the County of San Benito. As you are all aware, the issue at hand has become the amount of money certain entities, including the county and the City of Hollister, are investing in the operations of the city. There have been multiple ideas and continuous dialogue about the manner in which alternatives should be considered, and the consensus of the Intergovernmental Committee is, or was, I should say, at that point in time, to have a needs assessment conducted so that we could find out, number one, what the true cost of an alternative facility known as the TEL Center, Technology, Education, and Learning Center, would cost. That's number one, and that's what you're going to hear about today. And number two, before the Board of Supervisors, with regard to the discussions that have been ongoing regarding priority of resources, quite frankly, and this is something that Supervisor Medina alluded to in a previous meeting, is are we getting value? And if so, what type of value is being added to the services that the public is being provided? And squarely in front of you is going to be that discussion as presented by LSSI. Wanted to make sure also that you had an awareness of what you have in front of you in the agenda packet itself. You have the LSSI feedback, study, and recommendations. You also have a response from our county librarian, Nora Conte, that was attached. We wanted to make sure that, in fairness, the information that was provided was also provided to you in context. And so from our point of view, from the administrative point of view, we wanted to make sure that our approach was understood, and that was the central question that we considered. Are we having value added to the services that are being provided? And if so, is there a different manner in which that resource can be allocated or used to provide greater value, if any, to the community? So without further ado, I will present Dana, and she will take the presentation from here. She'll do that presentation, and we're available to answer any questions that you have afterwards. Dana?
See here. Good afternoon. Thank you again for having me here today. I'd also like to welcome Barbara Howison, who is my colleague. She is our regional director based at our Riverside County, and also is the director of the Riverside County Library System, and she was very instrumental in putting this report together. I also would like to acknowledge Nora and her team, very collaborative and helpful as we were doing our research, and again, you'll see quite a bit of this as we go through. So as Louis mentioned, we're Library Systems and Services, and you saw this a little bit as we were doing our initial proposal to you. And again, Barbara and I were the lead project leaders on this assessment. And with regards to methodology, again, we described this in a proposal, but it really involved a lot of citizen focus groups. We did community surveys. We met with Nora and her staff and team, as well as really looked at an analytic overview of the community, industry trends, and you'll see a lot of that information. It's very detailed out in your report. And excuse me, I'm getting familiar with your mouse. And so today's presentation, I'll be giving you a high-level sort of executive summary, general findings, as well as current library services, as Lee mentioned, you know, what kind of, where you might want to be looking at shifting some resources or different ways to use your resources, as well as ending with the TEL Center recommendations. Again, there's definitely challenges to address. We heard from a lot of people where this community wants to go. It's very vibrant, lots of opportunities, and people definitely saw the library as a potential pillar, as a gathering point. Very diverse population, and you'll see that in your demographics in terms of income, education levels, culture, and that can be very difficult to serve, and we addressed a lot of that as well in the report. And the thing that really bubbled to the top as well was a spirit of support for those in need. I mean, you can tell that, of course, by your large number of nonprofit agencies, but that came out again and again, especially in the focus groups, and that's reflected as well. There's a desire to ensure nobody is left behind in these kinds of services. In terms of where residents, their heads are at is improving overall quality of life, and there's definitely a strong feeling of connection to the community. There's also a feeling that library services are not necessarily reaching a broad audience right now, and there's a lot of areas for potential growth. In one of our IT assessments, we did see some concerns related to security and privacy of information. And then as well, there's definitely some operational efficiencies that we'll touch on. And that comes about to how do you use your resources? Is there a way to redirect that maybe can meet high demand, high interest areas of the community a little bit better? So from a high-level community overview, as I mentioned, a good mix of agriculture, small business. And I know this isn't new to you, especially being, a bedroom community to Silicon Valley. And where you see your projections growing right now, you're at about 59,000 residents and up to about 60,000, 61,000 in 2021. And so those are the figures we used in our assessment and projections for the TEL Center. In terms of demographics by age, about 22% of your population is either in the 0 to age 14. It's growing, and what that means is there's a high need for education and a high need for collaboration between anything that you do with a public library as well as your educational institutions. And so I think that came across right now is there is a bit of a disconnect. And if you want to have kind of a wraparound experience for your citizens starting out at age birth, and that's where, we talk about in libraries, early brain development happens the first 3 years of life. It's where a lot of those language skills, reading skills, everything starts to happen then, and that's usually where the library plays such a key critical role. And you see that, in terms of the feedback, people want this, and they definitely understand it's a cornerstone of the community. And then tying in with other programs that are going on, such as the Footsteps to Brilliance, 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten. And it seems like now, too, there's a number of these pop-up activities happening, but the feedback we heard is not necessarily a lot of that collaboration and connectiveness to it. In terms of the other main population growing is at 25 to 55. And as we get to the patron profiles, you'll see that's an area that's really maybe underserved right now and potential for growth. These, again, sometimes starting young families and dialing in. It's also a population that was interesting. They mentioned they buy books. They are readers. On average, they're buying about 14 books a year. And so when we look at that, is there a way to make this resource more valuable to them so your citizens can spend funding, and other opportunities in the community? And this is an overview of your income level, but it's then merged with patron population. So what's interesting is we heard a lot of feedback that the library meets the needs of lower income, but actually about 50% of your current library card holders fall within the $50,000 to $150,000 income. And we did see a big gap, and you'll see that on a future slide. Sometimes the people you think you're meeting their needs or you want to reach out to, that's not really necessarily happening at this time. Right now, again, going with that population figure, there's about 10,383 active card holders, and that's 17% of the population, and that accounts for 6,287 households out of 18,000 households here in the area. And that's where we look at how resources are being used. Are they spread, evenly throughout? Not that you'll ever have 100% of your residents using library services, but with the advent, of digital materials, things like that, usually distance isn't necessarily a barrier. And that's where, as we talk about opportunities to expand or grow, this is sort of a benchmark of where you're at right now. Based on state report data, it costs San Benito County about $8.91 every time a patron walks in the door, and this compares to $7.32 for an average library serving the similar population, and $3.38 for what we sort of look at as efficient libraries. Now, mind you, if all of a sudden you doubled your number of active card holders and more people are going in, that cost is going down. But and these numbers are really just, again, to give you a benchmark and a little bit of level of comparison. It is using state library data, and at the time of the study, that would have been for 2014, 2015. We did sort of take a glance at the newer release numbers, and they're very similar. There wasn't anything that was too different or askew. But this again, kind of gives you a little bit of a frame of reference. And in terms of the actual average number of checkouts per library patron, it's about 7.5 nationally. Here in California, 5.81, and 1.85 here in San Benito. Now, this slide, again, looks at your actual patron household activity. And in library world, we talk about occasional users and frequent users or power users. And that's really how are the resources that you're buying being used by a small population or really, again, being spread out. So here you can see, a large number of those households are in the, less than 50 checkouts a year. And sometimes there's a lot of reasons for that. Is the material available? Is it the content that they want? You have a couple extreme power users. 44 households checked out 1,000 items or more. That might be a school teacher, checking out classroom sets or things like that. But I'm going to walk you through, because as we start to look at things like door counts or circulation, that's not always necessarily the best metric. You sometimes want to be moving the dial of how do you engage a patron, somebody who only is checking out 5 books a year or visiting once a year, to get them to be a little bit more of a power user, to really utilize those resources. Excuse me, I'll get a little bit of water here. And that's, I think, sort of the top line is, maximizing the public benefit of these dollars that you're spending. So some targets you can look at is increasing number of active card holders. It's not enough just to keep adding, more cards. Is you really want people that you've engaged with, that you've given them a reason to use the library, whether in person or virtually. Focus on specific community groups. So if the desire of the community is to ensure that people who are in the lower than $50,000 a year income bracket are utilizing the library, that's where you can use, and Gale Analytics was our partner in this, subscriptions like that, and you can really move the dial. And this, again, we've talked to Nora a little bit about, these are potential for grant opportunities where you can really target an audience, target services, target outreach, target marketing, and then really see, have you touched that community? Are you seeing, more at-risk parents with a card that are actually using it? And same thing, things like program participation. It's not so much to have more programs, but programs that are a little more targeted and using them in different space. I know space is a limitation, but can you do activities off-site and utilize different public spaces a little bit differently?
That's the entry button.
Oh, and that'll keep it. Thank you. And these are some of the slides that you'll see in the report, but here is your look at your card holders and where they are on the income level. So you're seeing a lot in that high, like that middle, higher income range, and then where could you target that under 50,000 group a little bit more. So if you were to run the snapshot, quarterly or annually, you can see really where you're moving the dial. Here's another way to look at it. For every 100 people entering the doors, right now 5 are going to a program, and the majority of those are children's programming. 18 are using a computer, and 77, want a book. And that's not to say people in the program or using a computer wouldn't want that, but where we really look at is the resources being directed to materials. This is what people are coming in. They still want the content. Citizens are having to purchase materials. Is there a way to sort of shift the focus of that a little bit as well? One of the things we did was a public survey, and in this particular question, we asked, what would you like to see more of at the San Benito Library? And we did this in 2 ways. One, we actually give them buckets to choose from, because oftentimes if you asked, there's ideas that may not come to people, and then we also had a free form entry, and you'll see all the responses are included in your packet. And this was everything from community spaces to job help centers, entrepreneur space, teleworking space. And where that fell out was, and again, top of the list, people want materials from their library. That's really a big expectation. More laptop bars and more accommodation for bring your own device. In fact, we were talking in this meeting room, sometimes it's as basic as, do you have enough power? Or areas to set up and really make a space in that way. Coffee came up quite a bit. Community meeting spaces, job health center. So not necessarily you can do everything here, but this really starts to give you some idea of what maybe people are looking for, or where they saw gaps in the community, where they felt like these needs were not being met by other organizations. Uh-oh. Hang on. Yeah, let me start all over. Okay. And when we gave them a chance to write in their answer, some themes sort of came up. And again, open hours, I know you hear that a lot, activities for children in the evening and weekends, more selection of books, bestsellers, veteran resources, space more for teens, young adults, and just more space in general. And we asked them one thing they wish they could change about the current library. The cleanliness came up quite a bit, and updating the facility, I think, in terms of furnishing, unpleasant odor. And I know the weekend we came in, there was a flood, and that was like sort of a particular highlight, but it seems like that just did come up a lot, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Things like lighting. Lots of hours are answers related to parking, hours more space, offering things for adults to do, art sprays, free art classes, and actually that was a theme that came up a lot in the conversations as well. I don't know if there used to be more gallery space in Main Street, but that there is an emerging art community here, and you'll see in the TEL Center that's one of the components that we mentioned as well, and also special need programs or inclusion opportunities, and that's again very much a national trend where we're seeing programs specifically for adults or children with autism, are ways to tailor shape, how do you help job skill development in adults with mental disabilities? What things can we participate in and help with that? The IT assessment, and for this, we actually had our Dave Maxfield, our Chief Technology Officer, in, as well as Aaron Hodge, who is our Technology Manager in Riverside County, and Greg Voigt, who's our Technology Manager in Shasta County, and really went through an in-depth review. I know they met with the county IT people, spent a lot of time with Nora and her staff, and you have a very detailed report, and I know Dave would be happy to answer any questions, specifically from IT folks. And oftentimes, library technology issues can be very different from a county or security concerns. Some of the things we kind of noticed, and again, I pulled some high-level things here. I didn't want to go bullet by bullet from the whole report, but I think sort of front and center was definitely security vulnerabilities on both the network for patron and staff computers, ability, honestly, to tap into your patron database. There's not, a lot of times the default passwords are still in place, so if somebody happens to work on a particular system, like in Visionware, and knows that, they can go in and create a super user account, change everything, and at the time, staff wouldn't be necessarily aware that this is happening. And that's where, again, you'll see in a lot of the recommendations some really detailed things that you may want to consider doing here. As well, too, right now there's not a separation of patron or staff access, which basically means patrons have a way into your county system or anything that the staff are accessing. And typically, you definitely want a separation between those two, because as we were looking through, that's, again, quite a bit of vulnerability there, and more default passwords on a number of the setups there as well. And same thing with third-party products. They were never changed. And this is what you can sort of see is how we did the report in this area, what the issue is, what the industry best practice is, and then a recommendation. So here we notice the adult public computers are not filtered for unacceptable content. And then we sort of gave you the best practice in that and how to go about doing that. With staff and public printing, the number of printers exceeds reasonable cost-benefit ratio. Printing is spread out across too many printers and copiers. So as we start to look about where could you have some savings to redirect. It's these small things that sometimes can add up, or in this case, it might be extra licenses that you're paying for, doing something more cloud-based or thin client versus having to maintain everything locally. Definitely putting together a technology plan. That could be a 3 to 5 year piece that mirrors your strategic plan, your operational planning. Again, there's definitely expenses here, but it might be a scenario where I know there's been a number of grants for technology pieces, ensuring any grant that's written has the support that goes with it, because it appeared that a lot of items have been added or things have been happening without necessarily a real roadmap in place and a way to support it. I mean, I know county has to do this, and every time a new resource is added, if their ability to provide support isn't there, that's again where kind of it's turns into a security risk or just a performance risk in terms of how the IT is maintained. In terms of the actual library facility, excuse me here. We heard both from staff and from the patrons, that the current footprint in its current configuration doesn't meet the level of activity or needs or potential for growth. However, as we toured the space and really looked at, is there a way to reallocate some of that back office staff space for public use? And that's where, as we look at any square footage of a public building, how do we maximize that investment to ensure, again, there's a lot more public space compared to anything that's back office. And in most libraries today, as little as we can be doing in the back and have it be much more outward facing and focused on actual direct patron service, streamlining processes. And we've talked through a couple of things, something as simple as outsourcing processing. And I know Nora had mentioned concerns, for example, if you're in a union environment, can certain jobs or tasks be outsourced? And we did reach out to Ingram, who I know is one of the vendors they use, and it's very common in the industry, and they also have a number of libraries that are in a union environment. I think San Francisco Public would be one that's nearby, and they are happy to help you research that if that's an area you guys decide to pursue. Reducing clutter, unnecessary storage. And it's always one of the things, too, when you have a lot of supplies, it takes time to manage those inventory, and they're really being utilized. And I'll take you through a little bit of the space. I think this might be the director's office, and you can see there's, I think, activities that might be for programming, but is this, again, the best use of space, or can you streamline that? Because this could potentially, if we could free up some space in the back, become a conference room. It's very visible, it's got windows. So those are, again, something to think about. It's definitely a holistic plan that you would consider. Here's some of the more back office pictures. And we really look, too, is there anything that's a resource or supply for the public that should be out on the public side of the fence? Usually you might have seasonal collections in the back, but, all this kind of storage, what is this really going to be utilized, or how are you spending money on office supplies? Is there a way to really know what you have in that building? Kind of take you through some space. And even, for example, staff workspaces, if you can streamline those, do you need as many bigger cubicles, or can you have rotating workspaces? Because ideally, people are really out on the floor or out in the community. And you can see sort of some items shelved, and they may be ready, waiting for processing and things like that. But if you were to outsource cataloging processing, then your items arrive shelf-ready, meaning they can be unboxed and put directly out into the public space with no downtime in the back. In terms of general facility maintenance, now I understand the county cares for these buildings, and what we look at here is there a good communication between library staff and your facility needs folks, and having library staff help prioritize if there's a budget limit, what kind of work order management process, and putting together a longer-term schedule of facility repairs. So some of the things, and again, these are just samples. This happens to be the bench that's out front. Some ways a safety hazard with splinters, the wood seems unstable, and that's really that first impression. So, for example, as a priority, do you want that arrival experience to be something a little bit different? And so maybe that would be something that would go to the top of the list of, and as well, landscaping, a lot of trash in the area, and I don't know what the pickup schedule is, but that's something where if we can make sure library staff are keeping county folks informed. This happens to be inside the building, and this was, I believe, probably some leftover store or shelving. And it's one of those things, too. It had a caution tape. It had some dust, so it would mean, are you going to use it? Are you going to need it? And if not, maybe take it off the public area. Because we sort of think about this as somebody's living room, and walking in is every space really cared for, intended for, and that's where there was a number of these kind of things that it doesn't cost anything. It's just a matter of having a different perspective taking you through. This happens to be the drinking fountain outside. And again, it's just more of a cleaning issue, but if you think about a health or safety concern, and that's something where if staff can communicate, this needs to be done every day or every week or something, can you build in that kind of maintenance? So there's just sort of that general feel of, needing to, just the small things that you can take care of. Same thing with the lighting. A lot of those covers were missing, our bulbs were out. I don't know if there's a relamping schedule, but we did hear about lighting and that being an issue in some of the dark corners. And this may be a contributor to the part of the odor, the book mustiness, as materials that maybe have some water damage. And really looking, I know they did a big weeding project, but if it's items that aren't necessarily being used, or if they're really high demand, high interest, then order a fresh copy. Because oftentimes people are hesitant to bring this into their home as well, because if there is a musty or dirty feel, and that's really, as we look through the collection, there seem to be some areas of that could be contributing to that. And where we look to in terms of library rethinking this, and I would certainly encourage staff to get the design thinking for libraries. There's actually a toolkit that walks you through, and that's where it's very personalized service approach. How do you rethink your spaces? And we've done some of that, but as you want to go to the next level, this can be a really good resource throughout. Another study to look at, this was a study done by San Jose Public and Hayward Public by a company called Envirocell. And Envirocell actually works more in the retail environment with like a Walmart or Target or even stores like Macy's to look at customer behaviors. How are people using the space? How do they interact? And so this was one of the sort of first public library studies that was done. And some of the high-level findings that really, I think, apply out and that we're seeing, again, as a national trend, is 80% of checkouts are found by serendipitous browsing. Although we have our catalogs and we really drive people to those, it's ensuring that your shelving and your merchandising and your materials are meant to be just when you walk in, you can find them. And catalogs are really secondary. And I think originally during our study there was maybe 5 or 6 catalog computers, and I think you guys have since brought that down to again, just a shift in resources. Now a computer can be used for public access versus being dedicated to a catalog function. 93% spent less than 30 minutes, and sometimes that indicates you don't necessarily need a ton of seating areas, but can people come in quickly, find what they need and want? They want to stay, great, but a lot of people, it's like a grocery store. I come in, I get my items, and then I go, unless I'm staying for a program. Typically, they're visiting what we call 3 macro sections. That might be media, a fiction, nonfiction, and that where it becomes a challenge if you have people who are regular users. How do you introduce them to different services? And that's an area where we saw, a lot of potential, to do that, to expand interest in the library. Self-service points were frequently visited. I know Nora mentioned, I think the new self-checks are getting a lot of use, around maybe 70%, which is great, because that, again, frees up staff time for other activities. Customers are willing to perform functions independently. Most encounters required only basic staff assistance and short average length of assist. And unfortunately, their study found that half the people with a question won't ask. And that's often because you're behind a desk or staff are engaged in other activities. They call it sort of the top of the head where they're working on something. And you'll see one of the recommendation really talks about, can you get rid of those big service points, have a smaller footprint, still have a service desk, but more of a pod, which allows people to do roving, more side-by-side services. The library bookmobile we also touched on. This is such a great asset and resource of the community, and I think right now it's got pretty minimal usage. And we look at something like that where it's easy to deploy, it takes a staff member, and is there a way, if you could shift again some resources to really expand that out, to be much more involved in pop-up story times or programming or activities, adding Sunday hours with a bookmobile. So that really is a treasure. It's a beautiful mobile. I mean, we've seen it from the exterior, and it seems like that's a great, easy area for growth. In terms of collection management, we talked a lot about this in the report as well as the recommendations. And even though space is limited, and looking at some of the turnover figures, and I know, again, some weeding has occurred, but really we want to make sure everything on there has earned its place on the shelf. When we talk about, is it in the green zone? Are you oversaturated, undersaturated? Where could that collection grow? And that was the feedback that we heard, that the collection isn't necessarily meeting community needs right now. And that's where sometimes knowing you can't be everything to everybody, but when we really start to target some of the populations that you want to reach, is starting to dial into that a little bit more. Ensuring that items are pre-pubbed order, so street date is library date, because we don't want people walking in and seeing a bestseller that's now 60 days past. And I know, again, Nora and her staff are working with the vendor on that, but those are some metrics you may want to put into place to say, are we meeting this? Are we looking at this? And this can be a really good area, a really robust one, because that's, again, where resources are being directed. And certainly think if some of the things you could shift, there's a way to shift resources into the collection budget. 73 people out of every 100 walking in the door want a book, and how do we make sure we're able to supply that? Definitely on the e-content as this collection begins to grow, and these are some examples where you start to see in-shelf marketing. And this is actually, if you imagine just a wallpaper, it's a digital library with QR codes that'll jump you to content. So this is something that could be done on a wall within the library. It could be done on the exterior. So even when the library's closed, people still walk up and realize there's access to this. You can put it in bus stations, train stations, airports, doctor's offices. This is really a great way to extend reach, especially as you start to build out and grow that digital collection. And then definitely marketing within the stacks. And, some of the sessions we have are low or no cost. This is just an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, but you can see as you're walking through, it really brings that e-content to life. And that's, I think, a challenge for a lot of libraries, especially here where space is an issue. There's a lot of opportunities for growth. Now moving on to the TEL Center. Excuse me. Kind of at the end of a tail end of a cough here. So in terms of, again, looking at your population growth and the feedback, the size we are recommending is around 60,000 square feet. And, although the state of California doesn't offer sort of set standards, a general rule of thumb that we see in the industry has been about 1 square foot per capita. And again, making it large enough and flexible enough, and you'll really see in the details of the report, I'll walk you through some of the space allocations where we've looked at both assignable and unassignable space. And this sort of is a first page of that. And as you can see, looking at multiple uses of that, definitely with the business connection, with Creative Commons and makerspace pieces, children's area, and you can see, and that's again where Barbara used the Libras program to really detail this out, and I think that's a really great plan for you. And something you can do is a micro version of this, meaning if you look at your existing square footage, can you philosophically apply some of the same thinking of how you allocate teen space, children's space, adult space? If you can, again, free up some of that back office and make it more public, that this percentage and ratio, I think, is very relevant to your existing library as well. And as you can see, as we take you down, and things like non-assignable space are everything from restrooms, janitorial closets. So when you hear 60,000 square feet, the reality is your real space is going to be more about 41,000. So, and some of the descriptions that you have in a lot of detail in your report, hearing a need for either formal or informal education. I think as we're starting to see more charter schools or different opportunities there, could you have a permanent tenant, if you will? Or could you have space that the community college could lease, certain nights of the week? And so I think we saw a lot of desire for that and combinations of that, but really a real feeling that the library in this anchor space should be very connected to formal and informal education, as well as being traditionally, for lifelong learners, early childhood literacy, things like that. Ensuring this, again, came up quite a bit. The needs of low-income families are met, and bridging that technology gap. There is definitely a shortage of resources in this area, and just digital literacy as a whole. And so that came out quite a bit, is to ensure everybody can be a little bit more on a level playing field. And then serving career development needs of teens and adults. A lot of people will have, 10 or 20 careers throughout their life, so having that need for a refresh, re-education, retraining, redevelopment. Some of the more creative spaces, again, this really came out as well, of content creation, arts at performance center, interactive activities. And so you'll see we kind of detailed out things that you might want in a design lab area, and that's everything from 3D printing, basic engineering, and video studio production. Oftentimes now when you think about how much content is being produced for shows like Netflix, that are original productions, or all these companies that have websites with a video component, if students aren't learning that and really ready to come out into the job field, with some of these basic skills, it's a hard bridge to cross, a little bit later if you haven't had exposure or access to a lot of this. And performance and exhibit-friendly space. And you'll notice in the way that we've detailed it is having that flexibility. Can you break rooms apart, and can you open them up? It sounds like, that was, wanting this to be the hub, the go-to, both during daytime hours and in the evening as well. And some of the things we've talked about is, can you sort of close off certain sections of the library that allow you to still use that community space into the evening without having a fully staffed building. General estimated construction costs, and right now it's around, as we sort of looked at that, about $47 million, not including FF&E. And a way to look at this is, I know this is a multi-year project or something that could be 5 years out or further, is kind of keeping that in mind, where you would put in escalators, but this will at least give you the starting ballpark as well. And we have reviewed this with one of our partner architecture firms as well. So this, again, is at this moment a place to start. So, and so.
I got to ask a question.
Yeah.
You go ahead?
Go ahead, you can go.
Well, really, you did some work here in the community, and this is for the benefit of everybody. That has anybody of a small rural county that has the revenue that we have ever accomplished a $47 million facility ever? United States, anywhere.
Well, I would have to look that up for you, but I know if there's potential for facility grants, here in the state of California.
Yeah, but the problem with those facility grants, I'll tell you what the problem is that you have to have a match with it. Mm-hmm. Say we could come up with $25 million. 25% of $47 million, I think that's unachievable for us. And it's kind of I don't know, a bad jumping point for us. I don't know. I'm a little bit, I'm enjoying your report, mm-hmm. and I think there's some good constructive ideas to work with our library, and we need that. But I was looking for something that, maybe in my lifetime, a new facility, an achievable plan to go forward. But, is there other alternatives coming in the report?
Well, this one is based on a multi-story facility, which would, of course, add to construction cost, or if you start to have materials, the different kind of load bearing that you need, or seismic requirements. But if it's something where if you have a smaller footprint or scale this down, again, you could go down to a one-story facility or have a phase one with the potential to expand, over time. So, mm-hmm. But this is, again, if you were to say, this is what we want with all these activities, all these things, kind of as the beacon of very much multi-use. And so that's where you might look at potential revenue opportunities if you do have a performance space or you do have classroom space. That's, sometimes alternatives to funding. If you want a very much more limited use, again, you can go through where we've done the programming and space planning and taking out those components. Of course, that'll bring it down, in size and scope quite a bit, so cost. And this is where, to know if you were to do this kind of facility with the technology and the infrastructure that you would need to do this level, but it's like anything else. It's, you can always
last question.
Adjust.
Okay, one last question for me
Sure.
for right now. With this report and this plan, and we're talking about some grants that the state may or may not have in the future, because we would have to apply for a grant, have some of our own local money. I think the public has mentioned that some start, hitting up some sponsorships with some local industry, having fundraisers, bake sales, whatever, and us setting aside some money for on impact fees that we're starting to do countywide, which is a revenue stream. So now we're being a little bit more optimistic. Is this a plan that we could submit with a grant application that would kind of put us in line with some monies when the state at a time decides to move forward with a library grant?
Yeah, I think one of the key features of this, it really looks at, I want to say, the development of the downtown as a hub and a magnet. In some of the conversations, there's not really a gathering point of this kind of magnitude and stature, if you will, of where do you start to have community connections and economic development, revitalization of your downtown, potential new transportation opportunities like that. So I think it's not just a library. We've been calling it, let's say, the TEL Center, Technology, Education, and Libraries. But if you think of it in broader terms and scope, and that's where you see there is places in there where so many components of your community can connect. There is business development in there, and that's where some of these other places that may already have satellite spots, like a Chamber of Commerce, can that be the anchor hub? Even municipal services. I know the library right now offers, passport services, but is there other county space or offices? And again, you sort of see that we've laid out some of that because it may be where you're funding a certain resource in another area that now can come into the center again, or you have community partners that are, as one of the conversations with the community college is they start to add classes, they don't necessarily have the funding to expand out. So, but can they do a longer-term lease of so much space on a weekly basis, for example? So they're not necessarily a permanent tenant. And I think those are the kind of things that it's not necessarily just funding it for this, but to really go in and say, are there areas that could be revenue producing because of the nature of what the space will be used for?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Munsford.
Thank you, Mr. Can you go back to where you had the costs?
Mm-hmm.
759 per square
Base
foot.
construction is $550 a square foot. Ray, isn't our jail
600.
that's
620.
$620? I think your jail is the most expensive thing that you can build, and your base construction is right up there with it. How did you come up with 550?
This is from, I'm going to say ALA, our industry standards are here in California. FF&E is not included in that figure, so that's going to add another 100 to 125 per square foot. And it's like anything else with the building, depending on what level you want your furnishings, what
Actually,
level.
this is, that's right. You're up at almost 800 square foot, more than the jail.
792.
So,
And there's nothing more expensive to build than a jail.
again, this is a high-level, ballpark figure, but where you may make different decisions, trim back technology, infrastructure, to come up with different, if you adjusting these costs.
Okay. Supervisor Medina.
Okay, so when I think of the word realistic, having or showing a sensible and practical idea of what can be achieved or expected. Now, 60,000 square foot at $48 million, that's just something I can't, I just can't see that. I love the idea. I think we should tone it down. I also have seen in the past where you can build a building and behind, when you actually start the building process, you're able to almost move a wall and create another space. That's where I think we need to look at. We need to start small. I don't know if it's a 20,000 square foot. I don't know if it's 15, but we really have to ratchet that dollar value down. $47,000 or $47 million it's hard for a lot of people to look at. But we need a library. We need a community center where we can everybody can meet. So I'm not downing that. I'm just looking at bringing it down to more realistic. Now, back in 2000, most of the people that were here, they erected a great church, St. Benedict's. And that was done with a lot of private money, of course. And, that's what we need to do. We need to really go to our local businesses, go to our local community foundation, and see what we can do with them also. We need to partner this together with everyone. But I just think presenting it as this Taj Mahal right now at $48 million is just not the right way to market it at this point in time.
No, and it can absolutely, as you're saying, be phased in, or looking at the space planning. What are the priorities? I think as you, if you were to select an architect or kind of start to go that path, is having that in mind from the get-go and planning and designing that way. So it can be a multi-year project. I think a lot of that, though, is ensuring, for example, as the infrastructure is going in, will it give you that flexibility, to grow and expand as you go along.
Okay, Louis?
Let me step in here.
Oh, certainly.
So, members of the board, you're right. The Intergovernmental Committee asked us to take a look at what the greatest possible idea could be to put together a technology and education and learning center along the lines of what exists at the University of Monterey Bay, University of California, Monterey Bay. And they instructed us to use our imagination and go for broke. And that's what you've got here. Literally, almost, pretty close. It's pretty clear. Okay? And so we did that. And so I think what Dana has provided for all of you is exactly the point we're trying to make. I don't know that the Board of Supervisors, and this is ultimately your decision, is going to want to make a decision to allocate $47 million to build this kind of a facility. With that in mind, and with the high-level overview that has been provided to you by Dana and her team in conjunction with the library, that's why it's so important for us to kind of redirect our vision and look internally and ask some hard questions. How are we using our space? How are we using our resources? What are we allocating to the space that we have, and how much of that resource is going to be continued to be allocated by the county, and how much of that is going to have to be allocated by the city, because there are partners in all of this. And so in the packet that you have in front of you, you have two recommendations, if you will. Number one, let's refer this back to the Intergovernmental Committee for further discussion. I'm sure they're going to want to talk about this, and they're going to want to discuss it at length. But number two, I think some of the proposals, some of the suggestions that have been brought up in terms of how we take a look at what we're using now and how it could possibly be reallocated and used much more efficiently is something that the ad hoc committee internally could take a look at.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, just some brief comments. I think that we could sit here and talk about, for any agenda item, as we typically do, about the negative side of things. And we could talk about our limitations as a county, which I think that all five of us can agree. There's a lot of those limitations, especially when it comes to money in San Benito County and for all rural counties. But this is a vision, and I appreciate it. I appreciate staff. I appreciate the consultant. This is what I want in my community, and I've been saying it. I said it in my State of the County speech last year. At the end, I believe in December, I said it again. This is what we need in San Benito County. we need a place of learning. We have to think beyond books and beyond libraries. We need a community hub. We need a place that's going to attract people of all ages from all parts of our county, inside our county and outside of our county. I regularly attend meetings at the library in Gilroy. Why? Because they have it's a perfect center to get together. They have large conference rooms. I think that this is a vision for us. It's a great launching point. Certainly, is this going to happen while any of us are members of the board? Maybe not, but we could start the discussion. We could lay the foundation as far as creating this vision. And I took a lot away from the presentation. I took a lot away from this report. I think that a couple of notes I jotted down is I am interested to see how much square footage we have in the existing library that is not open to public use, because I think that we need to work with our public work staff to see, in our board, to see how we can best utilize our current library for public use. But moving forward, I am encouraged that we at least have this report and we could use it as a starting point. And I hope, I've been I've met with staff, myself and supervisor the chairman, and we are working with staff to create a strategy and a plan to get more stakeholders involved in this process, because it can't be, sure, San Benito County, we can lead this effort, but it's going to take other jurisdictions like our local colleges, like the city of Hollister, our school districts, and most importantly, local business owners, whether it's our local agricultural industry. And these are, this isn't something where we have to reinvent the wheel. It happens often. It happened in the Salinas Valley, where Hartnell College, they partnered with their agricultural industries over there, and they built a beautiful facility. I encourage everyone to go visit it. It's a part of the college. It's their ag. They have like a diesel mechanic program, ag construction program. And they literally built these facilities for the college, and they are well attended, and it's a great example of what we can do here in San Benito if we work together.
I agree, Supervisor Rivas. The proposal itself and your comments, really, this idea, it evokes the imagination. It excites me. It's $47 million, and we can argue about the square footage and the cost and what have you. But if you will recall, I think the school district recently passed a $100 million bond. And it can't just be the city and the county involved. It has to be the entire community. And if we really wanted to do it, I'm certainly sure that staff could figure out a way to come up with a strategy. But the reality is that we have current day challenges and future challenges. I think the vision, however, is exciting, and I think it's evocative, and I think it's something that is going to spark discussion. And I think it's a great idea. I really, really do. In the short term, we have the reality of our budget constraints and the resources that we have at hand, and we wanted to try and give the board a tool to kind of measure what it is we, as staff, are going to be directed to do going forward.
Luya, to my fellow supervisors, I thank you, and thank you, Supervisor Rivas, for your comments. I just feel that for us to shut it down now, it's not the right. Anyone can shut anything down, but it takes leaders to see the future and
of course
and start somewhere, just as
of course
Supervisor Rivas has said. So for us to laugh at it, make fun of it, and say there's no way it can happen. Many people have said that. Very few people have said let's take the lead and work with the community.
I agree with you.
Are we done with the presentation?
Dana, are you?
Actually, yeah, and I did want
I'm sorry.
to actually just end
Yes.
with a thank you to, of course, Nora and the library staff, members of the community. A lot of people gave time to meet with us, to share their insights and their feedback, both in person and virtually. And so we are very appreciative and have really enjoyed, getting to know the community and spending time here. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to open. Go ahead, Ray.
I did want to add one comment or one clarification, and it was regards to the IT portion of the actual presentation. I just wanted to clarify there are two separate networks. One is the library and one is the county. The constituents that are in the library cannot access county data or counting machines. I just want to make sure you're clear with that. There was an employee, I'm not sure if he's still there anymore, but I don't think so, Billy. He kind of spearheaded the IT work in the library itself. And I think what she was referring to is there was a Wi-Fi network set up for the staff on that side. So I just wanted to make sure that the board and that this report was clear. 2 separate networks completely. No one has access in that area to the other network, completely separate. So just want to make sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray. Okay, let me open up to the public. You have speaker cards?
Yes. First speaker is Judy Johnson. You'll remember I'm old. It takes me a while. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, everybody who's worked on this project. I'm secretary to the Friends of the Library, and I also sit on the Elementary School Oversight Committee on their measures M and V, which amounts to a whole lot of money, as Louis said. One of the things I like to do on vacation, and I go on vacation every chance I get, is visit libraries, and I have been exceedingly impressed with the shared space that many agencies have gone to. Beautiful one in Japan. I could have spent a week there. Many here in California. And I believe that recently, the elementary school has sent you a letter proposing some shared space on a renovation area that they're going to do at Sunny Slope, including a new library building. The pictures they showed were fantastic. I don't know all the details. You'll have them soon enough. But there's a good avenue for you to consider now, is partnering with the Hollister Elementary School Districts. Thank you for your time. Good luck. If I had some money, I'd give it to you. I don't, so there. Next speaker is Betty Mason.
Hi, I'm Betty Mason. Hi, I'm Betty Mason. I'm retired, and thank you for the board for your support all these years and keeping it open. We really appreciate all that because I was a librarian at the county library, and now I'm really happy to be retired. But I still support the library as much as I possibly can. I would really direct anybody's attention who is going through all these reports to Nora's responses, because they really clarify some of the questions and numbers on this major report that LSSI did. For example, it says that the majority of the population is white. And I looked at the census, and it's because all through these years, the last few years, we've had the Hispanic population is really almost up to 40 to 60%. So please, when you look at the census, maybe go in depth. I have a really long list of the census if you want it. Also, the smell that we have in the library. There is a good reason for that. Our janitor services was outsourced. So we only have janitor service, maintenance service, twice a week to clean the bathrooms. And our bathrooms are very smelly. At one point, we had, very good janitorial services that took really pride in cleaning the library. And just to state, if the library smells, then that's due to budget constraints. And I wish that it was better. But that's just some of the realities of being constrained by the budget and by staffing. And I noticed all the pictures that they took of the library, but they don't capture the positive force and the outstanding leadership that Nora has provided all these years, because for 10 years I worked under her, and a couple of years I worked under Joe Wadon. and the spirit is very positive. So when you look at those pictures, just remember to include that passion and that hard work and that dedication to our present library and all the miracles that Nora was able to pull out of her hat, working almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I just want to say I love the vision. I thank the LSSI for being positive.
Time's
And
up.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Ruth Erickson.
Good afternoon. Actually, there are two sheets there because one of the ladies had to leave, but she left what she wanted me to read. So,
I will give you 3 minutes. You can use it as much as you want.
yeah, but
How you wanna
what
use it?
about for her?
We'll read it. We'll accept it for the record. Your time is running up.
Well, okay. I just been making notes from what was said. Yes, I too enjoy the whole idea. We've talked about it many times over the years. A few statistics that maybe nobody has considered. We are a unique county. Out of 58 counties in California, we are the only one that has one library, excluding the little library in San Juan, which is a municipal library of less than 2,000 people. We are the only library. We do not have multiple cities with multiple libraries, which means if you can't find it here, you can find it at the next town. We don't have that. We have one library and one bookmobile, which is our branch. That's never been brought up. Far more people are using the library than shown by those checking out books and materials. So the amount shown in the report is far less than the actual amount of people that use the library. Staff space was brought up by the consultant to expand the public area into the staffing area at the back was requested by the library a few years ago, but the county denied funding. I believe it was $60,000, so we could never expand the public use into the back. We're in this new idea, this new plan. I didn't see anything for the Friends of the Library room or a bookstore, a supply space, or a desk, something like that, which is usual at a library. And we have a desk right now and a lot of boxes and books. We just don't have anywhere to put anything. Let's see, a studio was brought up for perhaps showing how to make videos and so on, and that's already done in the community by CMAP, the Community Media Access Partnership. We do that already. I'm just looking at all my scribbled notes here. And to also remember that when this building was built in 1960, there was maybe 18,000 people, I'm not sure exactly. So we're now got nearly 60,000 for a space of, for the 1960 size. So I will give you this statement. She really wanted it read out.
I'm sorry, but give it to Janet, and Janet will give it to us.
Nobody else can hear it.
I'm sorry.
That's not fair.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Mary Schneider.
She can grab another speaker card and have someone read it for her.
Thank you. Some of the people who have spoken have brought up what my concerns were also about janitorial and smell. The Friends just bought a rug for the barber room. The previous rug was bought by the Friends. In other words, I don't see the capital outlay going into normal maintenance. If anybody here has ever been a landlord, you know how long the life of a rug might be in a high-use area. The same with regard to the drinking fountain outside. I don't see that as being the library's responsibility. I think it's building and maintenance, and just as the janitorial service is less than we need, if we can feel about hepatitis C spreading, for example, when we have moms and kids in the little barber room, and then we have people from the community, maybe homeless, in the computer area. So, janitorial is a real big thing for me, but it's outsourced. I feel as a friend that I'm guilty for the messy area of the slides. Yes, we appraise books, we sell them at book sales, we sell them inside the library, and we sell them out of county. So I'm responsible. And those file cabinets, we write grants. And then we save the grants. We even have hard copies in case somebody's computer goes down, because we figure having an institutional memory helps us write grants. That's one of the ways we bring some money into the county. It's not big money, but it's like money. We have fundraising events. We do publicity in the library. You know, you'll see our little teapots for the tea that'll be coming up in March, and I expect I will see some of you or your wives or other delegates. So if you like to have us have a hub there, then we would appreciate having the space. So it's public relations to your community to feel they can donate their estate library to the library and that we will value their heritage. We do have a California collection, and we have been known to shoot things over to the Historical Society. But so that does mean, like, relationship with community volunteers may be a topic that you would want to discuss. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next speaker is Marty Richmond.
Good afternoon, Marty Richmond. The Friends of the Library are friends of mine, and if they didn't exist, things would be a lot worse. So I hope they're not being insulted by being told the truth. The truth is not insulting. The truth is the truth. Things would be a lot worse, and it would be a lot worse if the librarian hadn't come up with a way to get a lot of cheap furniture. But the truth of the matter is that our library stinks, okay? I mean, what are we doing? We playing games here? We don't fund it. Now, you know, we can argue forever about whose fault that is, but we don't fund it. I've downloaded all the financials from every library in the state of California, every single library, and I looked at the amount per capita, and we're near the bottom, okay? Right near the bottom. We may not be the last, but we're almost last. So per capita, we don't fund it. As far as $47 million, I think someone came up here and pointed out that the high school got $100 million. This bond, 2 years ago, they got $100 million in another bond. And there were two other bonds, I believe, this time around. And the state is building water tunnels, and they're going to put that on our tax bill. And no one asked me about that. And they're building a bullet train that's going to go nowhere. And they're going to put that on our tax bill, and we're not going to get any benefit out of that. So, you know, I'm just tired of hearing how poor we are when people are willing to pay $100 million over 30 years. We're talking about floating a bond for 30 years. We're not talking about paying $47 million, and if there's a school bond, we would only have to pay a third. I mean, a library bond, because we could get the other 2/3 in a grant, just like they did in the year 2000. And oh, by the way, we know exactly what a library costs per square foot, because I have every library that was built with the 2000. The cost of every library was built with the 2000 library bond, and there were 44 of them built. And you know what? We didn't even put an application in. And if you don't put an application in, you're not going to win. And the reason we don't care is because we don't care if anybody gets an education in this county. We don't care. I mean, California has got the second highest amount of people, percentage, over 11%, that don't even have a ninth grade education. They're 25 years old. We don't care. since we don't care, nobody gets an education. If they don't get an education, we don't need a library. So you got to decide. Do you want them to be competitive, or do you want them to go work in agriculture? And the truth of the matter is that 31% of the people who work in agriculture don't have a ninth grade education. That is from where the USDA, and they know, because they're the ones the government charges to look into that. So if you want to do something, then we got to look to do something. Doesn't have to be $47 million, but it ain't going to be a buck. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Good afternoon. My name is Sara Frias. I'm a member of the community who utilize the services plenty. I'm proud to say that thanks to the reading programs, 2 of my children are already in university because they start with the Born to Read program, also with all the other programs. I want to thank Jo Wanda because she in the 90s managed a budget, and many of you are aware how many miracles she did with that budget. At that time, same as the library, the bookmobile, it was a rock car. However, together with Jo Wanda and later with the leadership of Nora Connect, we were able to work in a new bookmobile that you see around. And the investment is paid and is worth it. My main thing is that California is the 6th largest budget in the world. The issue here is that we need a person, and a specialized persons, to be a grant writer coordinator for the services that we need here in the county. I'm looking for our members of the Board of Supervisors to take leadership and have a vision for the future, and not only you in the county but also in the city, to have a first-class institution and a library. I'm looking for you to look at opportunities we have in the county. For example, of the 400 block, the land costs only $390,000. It's a big building that I can visualize there, the library of the county. What we need to work also is in a measure bond issue. First, one for the library to be built, and second, another bond for the library to be maintained. It can be possible. We did it with Measure E even for what is now college, and we see the results. Also, that grant writer coordinator can work with the students who can be future to write many grants that this county never applied. For example, the Bill and Melissa Gates Foundation has many big grants with technology and money to upgrade libraries and schools. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else from the public? No? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Hold on a minute, Ray.
If I may, I just got a response from construction management company concerning the cost. He said it should be similar price. So not entirely out of the ballpark, but it's probably going to be similar for libraries, jails, and some of the larger public buildings. Just so the board is aware of that.
Okay. Let me ask a question of my fellow supervisors. Does the board wishes to direct the ad hoc committee to continue forward?
Well, I think it's still in the intergovernmental committee, to be honest with you. I'm not as sure about Hollister being the partner in it as we like to think. And then on top of that, we do need the Hollister School District, the Hollister High School, and Galvin College District. Otherwise, this is a pipe dream. There's no other way of putting it. If we don't have the partners in place to kind of move forward with a plan, this is the grandioso plan. We're not going to get there for sure. If this is just Samuel County, I love my library. I love my staff. that works at the library. I know they're somewhat handicapped with the funding that we have available. We can't fill our potholes right now, and so additional funding to the library, I don't, in the near-term future, is something that is hard to achieve. But what I was looking for in this report, and maybe it's there, and maybe the 60,000-foot equation should not have been part of the mathematics of it, but the $700 a foot is. And we go from there, and as we shore up our partners, shore up revenue streams, whether it's through a grant and bonding and private contributions, we develop a more realistic facility, and we go from there. But I think we still have a lot of work to do, and hopefully this is a report that kind of takes us to the first step, and we go from there and show the community we are serious about our library. And I appreciate your report and in the fact that short term there's some things that maybe we should give some thought to as a county for more workable space with the facility we have. Long term, let's go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Patel. Supervisor Medina?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Supervisor Bertello said, one of the things is we want to make it realistic. And when I think of realistic, that might be years and years from now. So what are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do for the library now that we've heard, well, I've heard Marty Richmond, I've heard everyone else talk about we're not funding the library as we speak now. So let's look at it two ways. Let's look at it short term, and let's look at it long term. Short term, we need to fix something, and we need to figure out how we can increase funding in the next budget year. Secondly, is then we have to create that vision that Robert had spoke of, that everyone is speaking of, whether it's 60,000, whether it's 20, whether it's 10, whatever it is. But we have to work on that also. But we just can't say, okay, we're going to have a vision and it's going to happen 5 years from now. We need to look at tomorrow also. And that's what I want to try to look at with my fellow Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Louis, we're going to have this presentation, correct? Is it on a...
Yes, the presentation will be provided to the Intergovernmental Committee as well.
Oh, okay.
Dana's not going to make the presentation, but this PowerPoint certainly can be made available.
Maybe you can kind of scale it down a little bit. I think this ran an hour.
Right.
I'm not sure we have that much time in intergovernment. I appreciate, and I hope you don't get offended by pointing you out, but Bill Tiffany is here from the High School Board of Trustees and a member of the Intergovernment. I appreciate you coming and hearing the presentation with us today. And we will definitely take this back to the Intergovernment so that the two cities can hear it and see what kind of collaboration we get from them.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Rios?
Yeah, just real briefly, I really have nothing to add than, other than the comments I just made, but I think that moving forward, certainly, I believe we still have that ad hoc with myself in the chair, so we'll continue to meet with staff. Yep. We initially had a discussion about potentially bringing forward a revenue generating library bond, so that's something that we had, we have to continue to work through and talk about. But when you look at, there's a lot of need in San Benito County. I know the high school and other members of this community, really want to strive for creating an aquatic center. Add a new state-of-the-art library or a learning center to that as well. And so we really have to, not only as a board but as a community, prioritize what it is we want here. And that's why earlier I mentioned, what I took away from this report is some strategies on how we can improve our current operation while we plan and, try to implement the next steps for making this vision a reality. And so certainly, it's not going to happen, it may not happen very quickly, but I think that if we organize the way we approach it, that certainly we can take one step at a time to accomplishing this vision, for sure. And I want to thank staff. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rios. Ray?
Yeah, and that was kind of one of our thought process when we put out the RFP, was to kind of look at it from today, what can we do today, and then what's our kind of that end goal. The one thing I wanted to mention is that we actually invited both the city councils to be here as well, just so that way everyone heard the message at the same time. But we'll definitely get back to the other cities and
All right, thank you. So
Thank you very much.
Take it back to the Intergovernmental Committee, and then the ad hoc committee will continue its
Okay.
purpose. Okay, thank
We'll
you.
do it. Thank you.
Now
Thank
we
you very
will go
much.
to Closed session,
Yep.
County Council.
Closed session conference with labor negotiators. The agency designated representatives are Allison Hayek, Reyes Espinoza, Joe Paul Gonzalez, Melinda Casillas, Georgia Cochran, Steve Coffey, authorized pursuant to Government Code 54957.6.
Okay, we will go to closed session.